Nya, Shivenya. For the love of God, will you keep it down over there, kid? Sorry. Hello everyone and welcome to another Rewind review. In this video we learn about the circle of life with one of my childhood favourite movies, and that is The Lion King. Released in 1994, the movie sees Lion Prince Simba and his father King Mufasa targeted by his bitter uncle who wants to ascend the throne himself. Directed by Roger Allers and Rob Minkoff and written for screen by Irene Mecchi, Jonathan Roberts and Linda Wolverton. I am not reading the full list of story writers for this one. Seriously, go check the credits. The Lion King features the voice talent of Matthew Broderick, Jeremy Irons, James Earl Jones, Moira Kelly, Nathan Lane, Ernie Sabella, Robert Guillaume, Whoopi Goldberg, Cheech Marin, Jim Cummings and Rowan Atkinson. So yes, as I said, The Lion King has always been one of my favourite Disney animated movies. I grew up watching this movie alongside the sequel Simba's Pride. I've seen the West End show, which was absolutely spectacular. Every time the movie gets a re-release in cinemas, I always go and see it. And to be honest, I think this movie might have actually been the first time that I saw a movie in IMAX format, but I'm not quite sure. So yes, it has always been a favourite. But it's been a while now since I've actually seen the movie all the way through, and this is the first time that I'm actually watching this movie with the mindset of actually doing a review for it. So I was kind of curious to see what my reaction to the movie would be this time and whether or not nostalgia has just kind of taken over. Now I will admit, when I rewatched this movie for this video, nostalgia hit me like a train in the same way that it did when I rewatched Finding Nemo for that review. But, and just like Finding Nemo, this movie is every bit as good as I remember it. But just before we proceed, I do want to give a little heads up that I will be going over some spoilery stuff for this movie, so if you have not seen The Lion King before, I'd advise watching the movie before seeing this review. So let's get into it. The story for this follows a young cub called Kimba, a white lion who... Sorry, wrong notes. The story for this follows a young lion cub called Simba, the son of King Mufasa and heir to the Pride Lands, who is cast out of his pride by his cruel and scheming uncle Scar, who claims that he killed his father. After years pass and Simba has grown up living with the philosophy of no worries for the rest of your days, his past comes back to haunt him, forcing him to decide between remaining an outcast or accepting his responsibilities, facing his demons and returning to become what he needs to be. It's a story that will sound familiar to you in some shape or form. It borrows a lot of elements and themes from countless classic tales, including William Shakespeare's Hamlet, which this movie is said to be based on. And I don't doubt that because it does share some similarities here and there. It also shares a few parallels to an anime too, but I'll get into that a little bit later. But as it is, the story that it is telling is told very well, it's very accessible to every age group, and it's easy to follow. I like that it isn't toned down for younger audiences. It does have its dark moments, it can be mature at times, but it is mixed together with some more cartoonish elements and comedy, but it's balanced out really well. The themes of responsibility, of growing up and confronting pain from the past are all handled extremely well and provide some great messages for everyone. The reason why this film can still hold up and resonate with people is because the story and its themes are timeless and something that everyone either goes through or understands. It connects with you on an emotional level and it stays with you as well. And when I say on an emotional level, I mean it, because you would have to have a heart of stone to get through this movie, especially during Mufasa's death and Simba's reaction to it, and not feel anything. It does have its heavier moments and they are handled extremely well, but as I said, it doesn't linger on that stuff for too long, and it does inject some very lively comedy into things. This movie can go from one of the most soul-crushing death sequences that has ever been featured in a Disney animated movie to a sequence of Timon and Pumbaa dressing up in drag and doing the hula. Luau, if you're hungry for a hunk of fat and juicy meat. I have already told you once to keep it down over there. I am not doing it again. If you keep doing it, I am coming over there and I'll make you stop. Anyway, it is genuinely impressive just how well this movie is balanced out. This movie could have been an absolute mess, and it could have been very different too. Don't forget, this movie went through several rewrites and revisions before going into production. That's why there's so many writers that are attached to this movie. I'm amazed just how well The Lion King actually turned out, considering that this movie was made by the B team. Disney themselves didn't seem to have a lot of faith in this movie, to the point where several animators who were working on The Lion King actually wanted to move from the B team onto the A team. No, not that A team before you ask. esque. The Disney A-Team were actually working on a different Disney animated movie that was set to release 1 year after The Lion King released, and that movie was Pocahontas, and they firmly believed that that movie was going to be a massive hit. And while I don't mind Pocahontas, there's no denying which of the two movies is better. I mean, that's pretty much reflected in the box office too. The Lion King actually made twice the amount that Pocahontas did on half its budget. Anyway, I genuinely love this movie. The story is absolutely brilliant, and it continues to have an impact on me every single time that I've watched it. Right, the Kimba controversy. For those that don't know, Kimba the White Lion is an anime series from Japan that was based on a manga series called The Jungle Emperor and first aired in 1965. Now, I haven't actually seen the show myself outside of the odd clip here and there, but from what I am aware of it, there are a lot of parallels between Kimba the White Lion and The Lion King. There's a load of shots that are quite similar, there's a lot of themes that are quite similar, and a lot of the characters that appear, the animals that they are, and the dynamic that they have with each other are quite similar too. A little too similar to just be a coincidence, especially when you have concept art from very early stages of development on The Lion King, which just so happens to have a white lion trying to catch a butterfly. Now look, it does happen, there's a lot of TV shows and movies that have come out over the years that are quite similar to others that did come out around about the same time, whether it's just the stories, the themes, the characters, things like that. It happens. But this isn't where the controversy comes from. The real controversy is Disney's handling of the entire situation. Not only are they denying that Kimba had any influence on the film, they're saying that they didn't even know that the show existed, which based on what I know is absolutely false. In fact, when Matthew Broderick, who voices older Simba, was initially hired, he was under the impression that it was Kimba, or at least an American adaptation of it. So they definitely cannot say that they had absolutely no knowledge of Kimba whatsoever, especially when some of the animators that did work on The Lion King were in Japan around the time that Kimba was actually being aired. Even The Simpsons made fun of it. It is genuinely crappy, and it's not entirely unexpected of Disney to have been like that. I don't think that there would be anywhere near as much controversy if Disney just acknowledged it and admitted that they did draw some influence from it, but hey ho, I don't really want to linger too much on the controversy surrounding The Lion King and Kimba the White Lion because it does tend to dominate the conversation whenever either of those projects are brought up, but I needed to acknowledge it in some way. But if you do want to see some more in-depth videos on the subject from people who have a lot more knowledge on the subject than me, there's plenty of videos out there, just go and search for them. Believe me, they are not hard to find. There is definitely some inspiration and influence. It's a crappy situation that Disney needs to remedy. Right, I think I'll leave that there. Let's get back on with the review. When it comes to the characters that appear in The Lion King, there's a really great variety of personalities and animals. And when it comes to the voice talent behind those characters, they are pretty much perfect. Look, it's really hard to be critical about the voice talent that worked on this movie because, as I said, I grew up with this movie. The voices that the characters have, as well as their singing voices, are their voices, and nothing will ever change that for me. James Earl Jones being a perfect example as Mufasa. That is the voice of power and authority, and he sounds awesome and balances out the drama, the emotional stuff, and a bit of humour too. Same with Rafiki, voiced by Robert Guillaume, who I absolutely love. He's easily my favourite character, gets some really memorable scenes, and he's involved in the most important bit that puts Simba on the right path. It's a very simple moment where you've got Rafiki basically teaching Simba about confronting his past, and there's a moment where he uses his staff and he just decks him over the head with it. And of course Simba's like, what are you doing that for? That really hurts. And he's like, well, it doesn't matter. It's in the past. Yes, but it still hurts. And that's the lesson that he's trying to teach him. He basically says, look, the past can hurt, but you can either do two things. One, you can either run from it or you can learn from it. So of course he tries smacking him again, and Simba ducks out the way, thus learning his lesson. It's a brilliant moment and by far the most pivotal sequence in Simba's story. Simba we get to see two different versions of. The younger cub voiced by Jonathan Taylor Thomas, and the older, more carefree heir to the kingdom voiced by Matthew Broderick. I think both of them do an excellent job with their section of the story, especially Jonathan, who does have some of the bigger emotional moments, and his voice work is genuinely stellar. Matthew Broderick, while not as strong a performance, does do well, and as I said, his voice really suits the more carefree Simba that he becomes when he lives with Timon and Pumbaa. But he can become more fearsome and authoritative during other scenes, and it's balanced out really well, and I do think that he is really good overall. He didn't do any of the roles though, that all came from an actor called Frank Welker. No, I didn't know that either. Both performances are great overall, and the direction that the writers do go with the character of Simba is really great, and it does a fantastic job of showing him maturing and accepting his responsibilities. And that's all paid off in one of the most memorable scenes of this entire movie. It's such a powerful sequence right towards the end where he's finally on Pride Rock and he just lets out that magnificent roar. It's just burned into my memory. It is that iconic. I really love what it is that they have done with Simba in this movie, and I do think that it is by far the most compelling part of this story. I also really like what it is that they've done with a lot of the side characters as well. This is actually one of the very rare Disney movies, Disney animated movies, where all of the side characters that appear to me are just as iconic and memorable as the main characters. Characters like Nala, who we also see as both the young cub voiced by Nikita Calamé Harris and the older and more responsible Nala voiced by Moira Kelly, who are both excellent. Plus, and even though she isn't in the movie that much, Sarabi, Simba's mother, is pretty good and adds an extra layer to the film with a great voice performance from Madge Sinclair. I also find it funny that Madge Sinclair and James Earl Jones, who play the King and Queen of the Pride Lands, actually play the King and Queen in Coming to America. I've only just found that out quite recently, but it is a fun little bit of trivia. I'm always partial to an appearance from Rowan Atkinson. He is one of my favourite comic actors of all time, so it's really cool hearing him actually having a voice in this movie, and he plays a character called Zazu. Zazu is a proper stick-in-the-mud authority figure who is constantly getting in the way of Simba and Nala's fun. He is so entertaining to watch. He's got some absolutely brilliant lines, and I think that Rowan Atkinson delivers those lines absolutely perfectly. I do feel a bit sorry for him at times, considering what it is that both Simba, Nala and the hyenas put him through, but he does add some fun sprinkles of humour. I mean, not as much as Timon and Pumbaa, but he does have his moments. And speaking of Timon and Pumbaa, they are the comedy characters. They act like comedy characters, they're presented like comedy characters, and most of the funniest moments tend to feature either one or both of them. But unlike a lot of other comedy characters, these two actually do contribute to the story. They are likeable, and their humour does work and can genuinely be funny. It's always a little bit worrying whenever they do introduce a comedy character into one of these movies, because you do automatically assume that they probably are going to be the most annoying parts of the film. But honestly, in my opinion, I think that Timon and Pumbaa actually do work, and I do find them funny. And like everyone else, Nathan Lane, who voices Timon, and Ernie Sabaya, who voices Pumbaa, are perfectly cast and help bring these characters to life with way more personality. I've seen some of the behind the scenes videos of them doing the voice recordings, and they are so much fun to watch. And the same goes for the three hyenas voiced by Whoopi Goldberg, Cheech Marin and Disney alumni Jim Cummings. All three fit these characters well, injecting the right energy and characteristics into their voices. Plus their laughter, especially Ed's, is just great. Now, every classic Disney animated movie needs to have a proper villain, and in this movie we have Jeremy Irons voicing Mufasa's brother, Scar. Scar is easily one of my favourite Disney villains. He's this power-hungry and not so subtle manipulator whose bitterness and resentment for not being king leads him to wanting both Mufasa and Simba dead. I think he is a load of fun, with Jeremy Irons giving a suitably sarcastic, sometimes pantomime performance, but he does become more ferocious when he's challenged, and despite him getting others to do his work, he is a threatening antagonist. I absolutely love him. I think the character is great. I think the voice performance from Jeremy Irons is absolutely perfect, and I love his design as well. Interestingly, there's actually a few deleted scenes that actually do expand on Scar's character a little bit more, especially during his reign when he takes over as King of Pride Rock. There's actually a few deleted scenes that actually show what's going on with him during his time as the ruler, including one sequence where he starts going a little bit mad and he realises that when he dies, he has no heir to inherit the throne from him. And there's a scene where he starts getting a little bit creepy towards Nala, and that's partially why she runs away later on. It's a weird and slightly uncomfortable sequence to watch, and while I do think that it is interesting seeing this side of Scar, I don't think that it was really needed. And that goes for the rest of the extended or deleted scenes, because while it is interesting seeing a lot of this stuff, I don't think that it is necessary, and I do think that it was a good decision to actually have those sequences removed. For me, the runtime for this movie is absolutely perfect. The pacing for it is just right, and I think that adding some of those deleted scenes in might have padded it out a little bit longer than it really needed to be. Strangely enough though, the West End production actually does feature a few of the deleted scenes, including Scar wanting to get an heir, and it even features one of my favourite Lion King songs, He Lives in You, which you've probably heard in The Lion King 2. That song was originally meant to be featured in this movie, and very sadly it was removed, but I did appreciate not only hearing it in the West End production, but Lion King 2 as well. But it is a shame that it was initially removed from this. But outside of that, I think the decisions that they made regarding the overall focus, the pacing and the runtime for this movie was the right call. I also think what was the right call is the art style and overall look. This was released back in a time when Disney animation, especially their 2D animated movies, all kind of had their own visual look and style to them. The overall look and design of The Lion King looks nothing like Aladdin. Aladdin looks nothing like Pocahontas. Pocahontas looks nothing like The Hunchback of Notre Dame. The Hunchback of Notre Dame looks nothing like Hercules or Atlantis, which looks nothing like The Emperor's New Groove. every single one of them have their own unique look and style to them. The characters in The Lion King all have their own very unique designs, and I like how those designs actually help emphasize their personalities a little bit more. And there's a really good blur between the characters looking like cartoon characters and actually looking like the animals that they are based on, especially when it comes to some of their movements, because some of the characters do look quite bouncy and quite cartoonish, but then others have a little bit more weight to them and they actually do look a little bit more realistic. I know that Disney Animation, whenever they do an animal focused movie, they do bring in live animals into the studio so that the animators can see how they move and have a reference point for them. So that probably helps. It's so good though. This is Disney Animation at the top of their game. The animation as a whole is amazing and it still looks good today, even with all the updates and tweaks. The colours really pop on screen, the backgrounds and environments look fantastic, the design of Pride Rock itself is iconic, and it made for a pretty awesome backdrop in Kingdom Hearts. The cinematography makes full use of the animation capabilities and the locations, and it helps it feel so much more cinematic as well. Seriously, see this movie on the big screen if you can. The stampede sequence is worth it alone. I also really like how they use lighting to help tell the story as well, like the more obvious one being when the hyenas take over the Pride Lands, that everything becomes quite lifeless and quite dark and dull and quite similar to what happens in the elephant graveyard. But then when everything's peaceful and back in harmony, everything looks lush and colourful and green, and it looks absolutely gorgeous. The movie looks absolutely fantastic, and purely based on the animation alone, this is easily one of Disney's best creations. The sound design as well is absolutely excellent overall. It makes this feel so much more bigger, it makes this feel so much more intense and realistic, and it sounds absolutely fantastic overall, especially sequences like the stampede sequence or the scene where Simba sees his father in the clouds. It's so atmospheric as well, especially if you have a decent sound system. That's one of the reasons why I am encouraging you to go and see this in the cinema, because you do get that experience. And finally, the soundtrack, which in my opinion is one of Disney's best and most iconic, and a large part of the reason for that is the film composer. The film composer is one of my all-time favourites, and that is Hans Zimmer. Hans Zimmer does what Hans Zimmer does best, and he has created this absolutely big and epic soundtrack that can be both playful and really tense. In some areas, it's a much more traditional movie soundtrack using the usual orchestral instruments that you would normally find in a big movie. But then in other times, it's injected with African themes and instruments and vocals. It gives it this very unique identity and sound, especially for the time that this movie was released. And it sounds amazing. Even the songs as well. I forgot to mention this was a musical, didn't I? The songs that are featured, courtesy of Elton John and Tim Rice, are absolutely brilliant. They are instantly catchy, they are very memorable, and they help enhance the story and help further the plot and help you understand what's going on with the characters. I also really like the balance of the songs as well, with some of the songs actually being sung by the characters as actual proper musical numbers, but then there's other songs that do feature more in the background to just kind of enhance a scene, and I think they chose the right ones for each sequence. The mix of songs is excellent, with songs like I Just Can't Wait to Be King, and easily the most iconic song from the movie, Hakuna Matata. I'm just going to very quickly interject that Hakuna Matata in Swahili does not mean no worries, which is what it means in the movie. Hakuna Matata in Swahili actually means no trouble. No worries is actually translated as Hakuna Wasi Wasi, which I don't think is anywhere near as catchy. Anyway, those songs are sung by the characters, including Be Prepared, which is easily one of the best, darkest, and just straight up epic Disney villain songs ever. I mean, it's no Hellfire or My Lullaby, but it's definitely up there. It's even more impressive considering just how long it took me to realise that Jeremy Irons, who voices Scar, doesn't actually sing the whole thing. Apparently when Jeremy Irons was actually doing the performance for the song, he actually damaged his vocal cords and he wasn't able to finish the song. So what they did was they brought Jim Cummings in to finish it, and you'd never know. That's how good he is at doing voices. Anyway, there's also a song that features in this called The Morning Report, and it's a song that Zazu sings to Mufasa, and he's just kind of reporting on the daily routine of the Pride Lands. But it was only featured in the special edition. I deliberately rewatched this movie on Disney Plus purely to see which version of the film they actually have on there, and thankfully it's the original theatrical version where you've got Simba basically learning how to pounce. That honestly, in my opinion, is the only song that doesn't quite fit. It is fun, and more Rowan Atkinson is usually a good thing, but yeah, I think I'll stick with the original. The other songs, as I said, are more atmospheric rather than coming from the characters, but they help set the mood and give a good idea of what's going on in the characters' heads, like Can You Feel the Love Tonight, or one of the best opening theme songs ever, The Circle of Life. Look, I like the version that Elton John released as a single to accompany this movie, but in all honesty, his version of it absolutely pales in comparison to the one that is actually featured in the movie. It is an amazing soundtrack, and it is definitely worth listening to. Yes, Avengers! I told you to keep it down, kid. Aye. What's with the boxing club? Wait. Okay, no more shouting. Let's just skip to the end. Overall, this is nothing short of fantastic. It's a very well made animated film with some dazzling visuals, brilliant voice performances, and an epic soundtrack. The characters and the story, while not the most original, are both memorable and easy to understand. The designs are really good and unique for each character. The animation and overall look is brilliant. It's paced out well, the sound design is excellent, the songs are catchy and memorable, and controversies aside, this is one of the best films to come from Disney animation. This is a brilliant, epic, funny, and highly memorable film that everyone of every age can watch and enjoy. I would easily say that this is a must-watch film, and to reiterate, if it ever comes back on the big screen, it is genuinely worth it. This was one of my favourite movies growing up, and I will happily say that I still love it as much as I did, and I had an absolute blast getting to revisit it. So with all that being said, my rating for The Lion King, without question, is a 10 out of 10. Oh, that's going to be sore tomorrow. Here's a little bit of trivia for you. Did you know that this is actually one of the few Disney animated movies that features a gag reel? It's all done in the same 2D animation art style as the movie, in the same way that Pixar used to do with a lot of their movies. It was only available on the 3D re-release of this movie on Blu-ray, so you can't really find it anywhere else other than online now. It is worth seeing if you've never seen it before. It's actually quite funny. I've mentioned pretty much everything else about this movie, and I thought it was a bit weird leaving the gag reel out. The video is going to be long enough as it is. Anyway, I think I'll leave things there. Thank you very much for staying to the end and watching this video. If you enjoyed this content, please like, subscribe, and be sure to hit that notification button. If you have seen The Lion King, let me know down in the comments what you think about it. Plus, if you have any suggestions for any future Rewind reviews you would like to see me do in the future, let me know down below. Thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you in the next video. See you guys.